There is a hush in the world when a truth that defies time, science, and decay rises from the earth like a flower in dry sand. A truth so pure, so untouched by man's rusting logic, that only the heavens could have carved it. I want to tell you, beloved, about such a truth. Her name was Bernadette, Saint Bernadette Soubirous, a child of Lourdes, a daughter of dirt poor earth, and yet a witness to divine glory. And when they laid her body down in that French soil, the world did not know what God had planned. Oh, come close now. Bring your doubt. Bring your need for proof. Lay your skepticism down like a heavy garment, because we are about to step into the sacred. She was no queen, no scholar, no woman of earthly acclaim. She was but a poor peasant girl, coughing up the sickness of poverty, living at the mercy of merciless times. But God, oh yes, but God has a habit of pulling diamonds from dust. He speaks not to the proud, but to the humbled, not to those who think they know, but to those who are willing to believe. And so, one day, by a small grotto in Lourdes, Bernadette saw her, the lady bathed in light, the lady dressed in white, the lady crowned with roses, with a rosary gliding through her fingers like whispers from eternity. The Virgin Mother appeared not to bishops or barons, but to a frail girl carrying kindling and kindness in her arms. Yes, child, let us begin where all things begin, in the dust, in the simple, soil-stained corners of this earth where greatness is not bred in palaces, but birthed in poverty. It is there, in the breathless shadows of forgotten places, that God stretches out his hand and anoints the unlikeliest of souls. And in the sleepy town of Lourdes, France, that holy hand reached down and touched a young girl named Bernadette Soubirous. Oh, she had no silver spoons. She knew no comfort of satin pillows nor fine linen sheets. She carried her poverty the way one carries a wounded bird, in silence, in reverence, and in pain. Her lungs wheezed with sickness. Her shoes were worn and thin. She came from a family broken down by hunger, living in a one-room cell that once housed prisoners. And yet there was something in her gaze. Yes, something eternal. A stillness. A flame untouched by the world's storms. You see, God has a habit, a holy habit, of slipping into the silence of the ordinary and stirring up the extraordinary. He does not move the way men expect him to. He chooses shepherd boys over kings, fishermen over scholars, and yes, even poor little girls who carry their prayers in whispers instead of grand speeches. The world looks for credentials. Heaven looks for surrender. Bernadette did not speak with authority, but with honesty. She did not come adorned in robes, but in rags. And yet, she was the vessel through which a divine encounter shook the heavens and echoed across generations. For when the Virgin Mary came down in light, pure, gentle, and radiant, she did not hover over cathedrals or sit upon thrones. No, beloved, she stood by a grotto, a cave where stones wept and silence reigned, and it was there, by a small trickling stream, that she appeared to Bernadette. Some would ask, why her? Why would God choose a frail girl who could barely read, whose days were filled with chores, whose body was brittle with affliction? Because, my dear, God is not impressed by the pride of men. He is moved by the purity of a soul. And Bernadette, oh, she was pure. Not in the way the world defines it, but in the quiet way of trust, of innocence untouched by ego, of faith untouched by fear. She did not ask for visions. She did not seek glory. She simply opened her heart and looked, and when she looked, she saw her, the lady, dressed in white, wrapped in light, crowned in roses. The Queen of Heaven stood before a peasant child and spoke in soft tones only angels could translate. And Bernadette believed. She did not understand everything, but she believed. And that, my dear, is the kind of faith that moves mountains. That is the kind of faith that pulls back the veil between heaven and earth. That is the kind of faith that exposes the splendor of God's plan. The town did not believe her. The priests questioned her. The doctors dismissed her. And still she held to what she saw. That little girl became a pillar in the wind. They tried to shake her, tried to bend her, tried to bury her testimony beneath the weight of logic and ridicule. But truth, when carried by the humble, cannot be silenced. You must understand, when God touches a life, it becomes a flame. And no matter how hard the world tries to snuff it out, it only burns brighter. Bernadette, that sweet child of the slums, became the voice of a miracle. She pointed not to herself, but always to the lady. She didn't ask for recognition, only that people listen and believe. And from her humble lips came words that would change the hearts of kings and commoners alike. I am the Immaculate Conception. And now, how could she have known that name? How could a poor girl, uneducated and untrained, declare a theological truth that even scholars debated? Because the Holy Spirit whispered it into her. Because she was willing, she was open. She was small enough for heaven to fit inside her. That's what makes her so mighty. The beauty of Bernadette's story is not just in what she saw. It's in who she was when she saw it. She was not extraordinary by human measure, but in the eyes of God she was the perfect vessel. Her humility was her crown. Her simplicity was her strength. And her faith, her faith was her fire. She teaches us something the world keeps trying to forget, that you don't have to be grand to be chosen. You don't need accolades to be anointed. You don't need to be seen by man to be seen by God. Bernadette's life shouts this truth from the mountains of time. God uses the humble to display his glory. He plants his wonders not in marble halls, but in hearts made of clay. He reveals his secrets not to the loud, but to the listening. So what does that mean for you? It means that your background does not disqualify you. Your poverty does not make you invisible. Your sickness does not silence your soul. Your quietness does not mean you are not heard. If God could choose Bernadette, a girl coughing in corners, shivering in a cold stone room, to carry a miracle that would shake the earth, then surely he can use you too. He sees you. He sees the nights you cry in secret. He sees the weariness you wear like a second skin. He knows the dreams you've buried, the hopes you've hidden, the prayers you've whispered into the darkness. And just as he chose Bernadette not because of what she had, but because of who she was, he can choose you. That is the glory of our God. He does not search for perfection. He searches for surrender. So don't look to be admired by men. Look to be available to God. Let your hands be open. Let your heart be still. Let your soul be soft enough to receive the divine. For just like Bernadette, you may be walking through life with heavy feet and hollow pockets, but you are walking on holy ground. And when God steps in, when heaven bends low, when the Spirit moves over your life, oh, child, you will become a living miracle, just like Bernadette. Truth, when it comes wrapped in rags and tied with silence, often walks right past the proud. The human heart, it has such a stubborn way of closing itself off to the divine. When a miracle does not roar, but whispers. When it does not come down on golden clouds, but rises from the lips of a peasant girl. Too many fold their arms, raise their eyebrows, and ask, who does she think she is? That's what they asked of Bernadette. A sickly child, small in frame, but mighty in spirit, dared to say what she had seen, dared to lift her voice above the dust, and declare that heaven had visited earth. And the people of Lourdes, those whose ears were tuned only to the noise of the world, scoffed at the idea that a barefoot girl could be heaven's messenger. They laughed, rolled their eyes, dismissed her as mad. But faith, my dear, does not beg for applause. It stands even when ridiculed. It blooms even in drought. They tried to silence her. Oh, how they tried! Priests frowned. Officials questioned. Doctors poked and prodded, hunting for signs of delirium, delusion, anything to write her off and tuck her away in the corner where miracles go to die. But Bernadette did not shrink. Her voice, trembling yet steady, spoke again and again, I saw the lady. She did not twist her words to suit the crowd. She did not soften her story to satisfy the skeptical. No, she stood in the fire of their doubt and never burned. She was not armed with power, but she was armored in truth. And truth, when it is real, does not need to shout to be heard. It echoes in the quiet. It sings beneath the storm. It rises again and again like a sunrise that cannot be stopped. Understand, child. People fear what they cannot explain. They fear the divine when it shows up in places that don't match their stained glass expectations. They want miracles to come polished and perfect, wrapped in wealth and sophistication. But God, He delights in confounding the wise. He places His wonders in the mouths of shepherds, in the dreams of prisoners, in the visions of fragile girls. And so Bernadette was doubted. They said she was lying, that she was seeking attention, that she must be ill in the mind. But look at the pattern of history. Prophets were mocked. Saints were stoned. Jesus Himself, the Son of the living God, was betrayed with a kiss and nailed to a cross. So why should Bernadette be spared the sting of disbelief? She bore it all with grace, not because she enjoyed the suffering, but because she knew what she had seen. Her clarity was her courage. Her encounter had carved truth so deep in her soul that no man's opinion could uproot it. And that, beloved, is the mark of a true messenger, someone who does not fold under pressure but shines beneath it. The world looked at her and saw weakness, but heaven saw a warrior. She returned to the grotto again and again, walking through crowds of gawking strangers, kneeling in the mud, praying with a purity that made the angels lean in. And, while people whispered behind her back and plotted ways to discredit her, Bernadette simply obeyed. For she understood what many do not: obedience is louder than defense. You don't have to argue when you know who sent you. Let me tell you something. When God gives you a vision, not everyone will see it. When God speaks to your spirit, not everyone will hear the echo. And when God calls you forward, some will try to pull you back. But you must keep walking. You must keep speaking. You must keep believing, even when the room goes silent and the people you thought would support you start to disappear. Bernadette knew that loneliness. She felt that isolation. But she never let it define her. She never let their disbelief stain the miracles she had experienced, because she wasn't carrying a story for applause. She was carrying it because it was true. And truth, child, is its own reward. Her bravery wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was quiet, patient, unshakable. That is the kind of bravery God honors. The kind that holds fast when the crowd turns cold. The kind that kneels in the same muddy place, even when the world tells you it's all in your head. You see, when you walk in the footsteps of the divine, there will always be voices trying to pull you off the path. Some of them will be loud and cruel. Others will be quiet and convincing. But you must remember Bernadette. Remember her trembling hands folded in prayer. Remember her eyes, wide with wonder and soaked with faith. Remember her courage to speak of beauty even while surrounded by scorn. God never promised her fame. He never promised her ease. What He gave her was a glimpse of heaven, and that was enough to carry her through a lifetime of misunderstanding. That was enough to light a fire in her bones that no one could put out. Let the world doubt you. Let them question. Let them analyze and theorize and speculate. But do not let them steal your fire. If you've seen the light, hold on to it. If you've heard His voice, follow it. If you've felt the stirrings of the holy, then wrap them around your soul like a song and walk forward, no matter who turns away. Bernadette's story is not just about visions. It's about a girl who chose belief over approval. It's about standing tall when you are small. It's about listening to God's whisper, even when the world is shouting in your ear. So when they doubt you, and they will, remember the girl from Lourdes. Remember how she stood barefoot before kings and scholars with nothing but her truth. And remember, this truth doesn't always need a crown. It doesn't always walk in glory. Sometimes it shows up in a poor girl's eyes and changes the world. There are moments in this life, rare and holy, when God breaks every law that man has written about life and death, time and decay. Moments when heaven leans low and presses its divine fingerprint into the fabric of this world. Not with thunder, not with war, but with the silent stillness of the miraculous. And in the case of Saint Bernadette Soubirous, that miracle came not in her life alone, but in her death. They laid her down in the quiet earth, a young woman barely into her 30s. The girl who once saw the Virgin at the grotto had long since slipped into silence. Her body, like all others, was expected to fade into the soil. Flesh to dust, bone to brittle. That is the way of things, is it not? That is what we've been taught to expect. Death takes all, leaves nothing untouched. But oh, child God is not bound by expectation. Decades passed. Time moved forward with its heavy feet. The world forgot what it could not see. Yet something holy was stirring beneath the ground. Something sacred was being preserved, not by oils or rituals, not by the hand of man, but by the will of God. When they opened her tomb, what they saw was not a skeleton, not a body ravaged by time, but a girl resting, her skin still smooth, her eyes still shut in perfect peace, her hands folded in prayer uncorrupted by the years. No rot, no ruin, no stench of death, just stillness, just beauty, just God. This, beloved, is what we call incorrupt. This is what we call divine defiance. And it was no accident, no trick of temperature or preservation. It was a message from heaven, a living sermon in still flesh. See, when God wants to remind the world that he is still in control, he does not need thunderbolts or earthquakes. He needs only a humble vessel, a quiet yes, a life surrendered. Bernadette's incorrupt body is not just a marvel. It is a message, a reminder that holiness leaves a residue, that when you walk so close to the divine, even death cannot fully touch you. Her body lies in a glass casket, yes, but child, her presence, oh, it speaks louder than words. It speaks to the faithful, the doubters, the wanderers. It tells a story that no book can hold, no scientist can fully explain. It says this is what God can do with a life that is given to him. Now you must understand, Bernadette didn't seek sainthood. She didn't set out to be admired or remembered. She simply obeyed. And that, my dear, is where the miracle begins. Not in her fame, but in her faith. Not in her beauty, but in her belief. She said yes to God again and again, even when it cost her comfort, even when it cost her peace. And what did heaven do in return? Heaven wrapped her in protection that went beyond life. Heaven honored her surrender by preserving her in death. Because sometimes God does not just use you to speak. He uses you to be a sign, to be a wonder, to be proof that holiness is not a fable but a fact. Imagine it a world that claims everything must decay. A world that trusts only what can be measured. A world that scoffs at miracles and boxes in God's power. And then in the middle of that world, a girl's body lies untouched for over a century, not embalmed, not hidden, but resting beneath glass for all to see. That is not science, my love. That is sovereignty. It is God stepping onto the stage of disbelief and saying, behold what I can do. Bernadette's incorrupt body is not about vanity. It's not about proving she was more than human. No, it's about proving that God keeps what is his. He protects what is pure. He honors what is humble. And in a world so quick to exalt the proud, he lifts up the lowly, even after they've taken their final breath. So what does this mean for you? It means that every act of obedience matters. Every quiet prayer. Every painful yes. Every time you choose righteousness over recognition, God sees it. And when you feel forgotten, when you feel buried beneath the weight of life's demands, remember Bernadette. Because even in the ground, she was not forgotten. Even in death, God was still writing her story. Let her body remind you that holiness does not die with the flesh. that a life surrendered to God leaves echoes that ripple across time. Let it remind you that God does not throw away his treasures. He keeps them, preserves them, honors them. Her incorruption is more than physical. It is spiritual. It is a mirror to what can happen when we live our lives bathed in humility and drenched in faith. When we strip away pride, when we let go of needing to be understood, when we simply walk in obedience, God wraps us in his glory. And that glory, it doesn't fade with the grave. Some will still scoff. They always do. Some will say it is myth, that it is exaggeration or error. But deep in the spirit of those who know God, something stirs at the sight of her. Something says, this is real. Something ancient. Something holy. Something that cannot be explained but only felt. That, beloved, is the whisper of faith. And faith does not need proof to believe. But sometimes God gives us proof anyway. Not because he has to, but because he loves us enough to leave signs along the road. Saint Bernadette is one of those signs. She is a flame that did not burn out, a flower that did not wilt, a soul whose purity left fingerprints on her flesh. So let the world study. Let them speculate. But let your heart stand in awe, for what lies behind that glass casket in Nevers, France, is not just a body, it is a witness. And that witness says God still moves. God still honors. God still holds his children, even in death. And if he did it for her, if he preserved her, protected her, and used her, then surely he is not done with you. Child, hush your heart for a moment and listen, not with your ears, but with your spirit. Let your soul stretch wide like the morning sky, and understand this holy truth. God does not do anything by accident. When he moves with purpose. When he speaks, his words do not fall to the ground. And when he preserves not just for the miracle's sake, but for the message it carries. When they lifted the lid on Saint Bernadette's tomb and saw her body untouched by decay, what they discovered was more than a marvel. It was a mirror that showed us something eternal, something that echoes deep into the caverns of our human longing. It said, what God keeps, the world cannot destroy. Her incorrupt body, resting in stillness and grace, became a sermon without sound. And child, you'd better believe that sermon is still being preached, because this isn't just about Bernadette. It's about us. It's about what God does when a soul gives itself completely, wholly, humbly. It's about what he's willing to protect. Not just a body, but a calling, a purpose, a destiny. See, we live in a world of rust and ruin. Everything seems to fade. Our joy gets chipped away. Our hope gets weathered by disappointment. Our dreams get buried beneath years of struggle. People leave, love grows cold, and our peace gets stolen like a thief slipping through an unlocked door. And yet, in the midst of all this loss, here lies Bernadette, whole, silent, beautiful, untouched by the claws of time. And so I ask you, what is it that you think God cannot keep? Your future, your dignity, your calling, your voice. Because he can, he will. If he preserved her flesh through a century and more, what makes you think he can't preserve your purpose? What makes you think he can't take that broken thing you handed him in a midnight prayer and keep it safe, whole and radiant? He's the same God who watched over Bernadette in death, just as he watched over her in life. He's the same God who can guard your peace like a soldier in the night, who can breathe life back into dreams you thought were dead. Yes, baby, the miracle of Bernadette's incorruption is not just for spectacle. It's a symbol, a divine declaration that what belongs to God will never be truly lost. And let me tell you something. You belong to God. You may have been battered by life, worn down by sorrow, but God has not turned his face from you. He's still the keeper, still the preserver, still the one who wraps his arms around the things the world deems disposable and says, "This is mine." People will try to strip your worth. They will tell you you're too far gone, too broken, too late. But Bernadette's body says otherwise. Her stillness speaks louder than 1,000 voices. It says God doesn't forget who he formed. He remembers, he redeems, he restores. Her incorruptible frame resting beneath, that glass tells you that heaven does not just see you. It holds you. And don't you miss this? God didn't preserve Bernadette to glorify the girl. He preserved her to glorify himself, to show the world what he can do with the surrendered, with the obedient, with the overlooked and underestimated. He used her stillness to stir our spirits. He made her quiet body shout across time. This is what faith can do. So what does it mean for you? Sitting there with your wounds and your worries. It means the hands you lift in prayer are not wasted. It means the kindness you give, even when no one thanks you, is seen. It means the nights you cry out in darkness are heard by the one who still moves mountains and opens tombs. It means that if you place your life in his hands, he will protect the parts of you the world tried to kill. You may not be preserved in a glass casket for people to see, but God, oh, God, can preserve your joy. He can preserve your name when people try to drag it through the mud. He can preserve your spirit when life tries to break it. He can preserve your future when your past tries to haunt you, because he is still in the business of preservation, still in the work of keeping what is sacred, still guarding the faith-filled, the surrendered, the willing. Let Bernadette be your reminder. She who once coughed through suffering now rests untouched by time. She who once faced disbelief now stands as a monument of divine truth. She who once kneeled before the Virgin Mother now reminds the world that God keeps what man forgets. So let your faith rise. Let your hope take shape again. Let your heart remember that you are not lost in the noise of this world. You are seen, you are held, you are kept. Yes, baby, kept. Kept when the world spins too fast. Kept when the storms roar too loud. Kept when your strength is gone and you've got nothing left but a whisper of a prayer. God hears it, and he keeps you. Bernadette is proof, not just of a miracle that defied science, but of a God who defies doubt. She's proof that your surrender is never in vain, that even when the lights go dim and the crowds fade and your story seems forgotten, he remembers. And in his memory you are preserved. So today, don't just look at that girl behind the glass and marvel. Take it deeper. Let your soul see what God is telling you through her stillness. He's saying, I will keep you. I will guard what is mine. And no grave, no failure, no time, no doubt can take you from me. That, beloved, is the miracle. Not that her body is whole, but that her life still speaks. Not that she rests without decay, but that her surrender still breathes. Not that she was chosen once, but that her choosing still reaches you now. And if God can preserve her story, he can preserve yours too. There is a hush that falls over the soul when it encounters something it cannot explain. A stillness, deep and wide, that wraps itself around the mind and says, be quiet. Listen. There's something more. That's what happens when you stand before the resting place of Saint Bernadette Soubirous. You do not merely look at her body. You feel something rise in your chest. Something ancient, something holy. Her presence does not shout, and yet it speaks. It does not demand, and yet it draws you in. Because this miracle, this unspoiled vessel, exposes something the world keeps trying to forget. Miracles are still happening, if we dare to believe. You see, we live in a time that bows to reason, a time that worships what it can measure, control, dissect, and label. The modern mind is a courtroom, and faith is always on trial. We demand evidence, documentation, a scientific explanation wrapped in neat little footnotes. We no longer tremble before mystery. We try to tame it. But God, child, he is not a tame lion. He is wild in wonder. He is bold in beauty. He is sovereign in silence. And when he chooses to move, he does not ask permission from our pride. Saint Bernadette was not preserved so we could gawk at her. She was preserved so we could remember. Remember that the God who parted the Red Sea still parts the waters in our lives. That the God who raised Lazarus still raises the broken, the bruised, the buried dreams. That the God who healed with mud and spit still heals with unseen hands. But if you only look with your eyes, you'll miss it. If you only hear with your ears, you'll miss the whisper. You must believe. Belief, you see, is not weakness. It is not ignorance. It is not some dusty old virtue reserved for grandmothers and choir singers. No, belief is power. Belief is rebellion in a world that worships doubt. Belief is a light in the darkness, a torch passed down from trembling hand to trembling hand through every generation that refused to stop hoping. When you stand before the incorrupt body of Bernadette, heaven is inviting you to believe again, to believe in what cannot be explained, to believe in what cannot be bought, to believe in what cannot be faked or fabricated. Her body is not frozen in time. It is frozen in truth. The truth that God is real, that holiness is real, that grace can still reach down into the depths and do the impossible. But the real miracle is not just that her flesh was untouched by decay. The real miracle is that her surrender still has power, that a girl who chose humility over applause is now preaching without a voice, reaching without hands, touching lives she never met. That is the miracle, that God uses the quiet ones to thunder across history. And if you believe that, if you dare to believe that, then you begin to see the miracles in your own life. You see the way God kept you when you didn't even know you were being kept. You see the way peace crept in when you were too tired to pray. You see the way a broken heart still beats, the way hope still stirs after 1,000 disappointments, the way your soul is still standing even when life tried to crush it. That's a miracle too. You are a miracle. But belief is a choice, baby, and the world will try to steal it from you every single day. The headlines scream fear. The doctors give diagnoses. The bank account whispers lack. The mirror points out flaws. And in all of that noise, belief gets drowned. Unless you choose to believe anyway. That's what Bernadette did. She believed when they laughed. She believed when they doubted. She believed when they questioned her sanity, her sincerity, her soul. And because she believed, we now have a witness, a holy witness that even death couldn't silence. That kind of faith, it doesn't vanish, it echoes. So, child, what is it that you need to believe for today? Is it healing? Rest